Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Decloak podcast. And today's special guest is Don Baham. Don, how are you?
I'm doing well, Leo. It's good to be here.
Excellent. And thanks again for being on the podcast. I know you reached out, I think, was it maybe through the Forbes Technology Council or maybe a Slack group?
It was a
Something like
Slack
that?
group, and I think it might have been the CISO Society. I'm not sure. It's one of those Slack groups. Who knows?
Excellent. It's funny, like the minute I joined the Forbes Technology and I posted it, I was like inundated. I can't even keep track with them, which is a good thing. That
That's a
means
good
that
problem to
people
have. Yeah.
exactly. I always need guests. So,
Yeah.
and also, I hopefully I pronounced your name correctly as well.
You did.
Yeah. I mean, I've been getting stick on the channel for my accent, but anyway. So, Don, please introduce yourself, tell the world who you are, and then run me through your career.
Sure. So right now I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Rubicon Founders. It's a healthcare investment firm based here in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I'm located. I'm a West Coaster. So I grew up in California, worked there for quite some time, and then finally convinced the wife to move out here to Nashville about 11 years ago. So out here raising a family. It's been a great place to be, and a great information security community here as well. Brief career. I started in the information technology infrastructure side of things. So doing system administration, crawling our desks, building servers, that kind of thing. Did that for a long time. Professional services for a while. And then had the opportunity when I was at a managed service provider to jump into the security side of things. So I got pulled in by one of the leaders over there and said, "Hey, we're going to teach you how to do pen testing." And that was that. So I don't know, maybe 15 years ago almost, I think at this point, and started doing physical pen testing, which was a hell of a lot of fun. So breaking into banks and high-rise buildings and trying to break into data centers. Not so successful at breaking into data centers, but I tried. Had a blast doing that. Gets the heart racing. All kinds of fun. Trying to get into places you're not supposed to be, and new skills that you're able to develop through that process as well. So had a great time doing that, and slowly and surely kind of moved up into leadership positions, and here I am today, and I've been a CISO a couple times over now, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing now.
I love it. And then that's quite interesting. Quite a bit of a deviation. Like, hey, you're going to be doing pen testing. You must be like, what the fuck is this?
I mean, I really honestly had no idea what I was getting myself into. And at the same time, I love change. So I have always been somebody that's like, all right, like whatever it is, I'll do it. I don't really care. So, and I enjoy doing new things, learning new things, building things. So yeah, had the opportunity. I'm like, why not? Sure. I don't know what. So then I was a crash course in Linux and pen testing techniques and tools that I'd never used, and like social engineering, and printing out fake badges and getting clothing that looked like a vendor. I mean, all the stuff that I'd never been exposed to, but had the opportunity and had some good leaders teaching me how to do those things, and learned a lot of things, made a lot of mistakes. But I still remember one of the first assignments I was on, and I literally like scoped out this bank, this administration building at the bank, attached to one of the branches, figuring out when people came in and out, and it's exciting. So I by the way, I did get into that bank, and I did get access to things that I shouldn't have had access to, and I did have a get out of jail free card. So it was just fun. Fun.
In my head, I'm picturing you like that De Niro movie, Heat.
Yes.
You're like scoping it out. I mean, that is like an amazing classic movie.
I love that movie. I watch it periodically. One of my favorites, and not quite. I'm certainly not as cool as the actors in that movie, De Niro and Val Kilmer and all those. That's cool. But I appreciate the imagination you've got, Leo, and certainly I'll think of myself in that way moving forward.
Amazing. And just for like our audiences, like kind of talk me through the difference of like like a kind of, obviously you would have learned like digital penetration testing compared to like physical,
Hmm.
like kind of talk me through the difference, the pros and cons of it, because like it's so rare to hear someone like case a bank,
Yeah.
then like, tailgate someone in, or like, did you like have to get any like acting lessons? I know that sounds cheesy, but like to kind of act the part, like, hey, I'm a security guard or
Yeah.
I'm an AT, is that what
AT&T.
they're
Yeah.
called? Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, you
Like,
got it. Well,
what are
actually,
those
it's funny you
guys? Yeah.
say that. I mean, like that was one of our personas. AT&T. It was great. An easy one typically was, a utility, right? So whether it was electrical or telecom utility, it's a great way to get in. Yeah, it's there are obviously nuances to both doing kind of the digital side and physical side, but we would the group I was with excuse me, would tend to combine those two. So, for example, I'll go back to one of the
Yeah,
first examples, and it was a sorry about that. It was
okay.
a bank in Central California, and so the assignment was, yes, physically try to get access to the bank, but when you're on the inside, then you switch over to kind of the digital side, right? So combination of we kind of combine those two worlds. So one, it was, yeah, you would go. I mean, I went out the night before, stayed in a hotel near the bank. I went out early in the morning that next day, sat in a parking lot close to the bank to try to see when people would come in and how they would enter and exit. And this was my entry point. I decided was not a branch because that was much harder to get access to. Branch employees tend to be much more vigilant about who's coming in and out. Obviously, they're dealing with some cash there. There's some physical security concerns that they have. So rather than we did also tested branch security. That was a much harder exercise to do. So I decided I'm going to come in on the administration building side, watch patterns of people coming in and out, and yeah, took some cues from situations I'd learned from leaders in that space in my company, and said, trying to appeal to people who want to be nice, want to be kind to others, right? So walking up and simply saying, and this still works today, but walking up and simply saying, I forgot my badge. Could you hold the door for me? That tailgating does work because you kind of play on people's emotions, right? And they want to be helpful, they want to be kind, most people anyway. But you also kind of look at least I did, you look at the person that you're going to try to tailgate behind, right? So what are they doing? Do they look a little frenzied? Do they have a lot of things in their arms as well? How can I play off of how they're presenting themselves in order to kind of sympathize with them, and they'll sympathize with me, and then we'll get into the branch. And you got to dress your part. So in that instance, I did not dress up, I don't believe, as a utility. I was dressed up with a coat and tie and kind of looked like I was doing business with a bank and I kind of belong there, and play that kind of executive or business leader persona to get access. And then once I got in there, so I was successful to tailgate in. Once I got in there, then it was, okay, what else can I do? Can I grab information off the printer? Because we still printed a lot. I mean, people still do print, but not as much. But there'd be sensitive information sitting on printers. I would grab that. And then I would find a conference room. I did this time and time again. Find a conference room, turn on the light, close the door, see if you can get into their network from there. So plug in, and a lot of things have evolved around network access controls, doing different things like, okay, making sure the conference room, Ethernet jack is not tied into your regular network, things like that. But back then, and 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't as common. So a lot of times I could get into a conference room, plug in, and I was on the main network. And that also meant I was typically on the network where the core banking system was, which holds everything that is key and vital to the bank. It typically it sometimes would even hold HR information, so internal employees, personal information, as well as banking customers. Yeah. And so if I could physically get in and then get onto the network and then get access to information, it was a score all around.
I love it. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, obviously no acting lessons then. You just kind of went off the cuff, full natural, then
No. And you get
see my pro.
comfortable with it too. I mean, it's sure. I was nervous. My heart gets racing, you know, and even though I wasn't going to get in trouble necessarily for this, because I was supposed to be doing it, we were under contract, it still felt like, I don't know, just felt exciting. Right.
Yeah,
So, and you definitely had some nerves to overcome. The more you do it, like anything, the easier it becomes, the more natural you become at it. So definitely took some practice.
I love it. I feel like I could just go on this topic forever, right? But the kind of last thing before we move on would be: is there any elements of like psychological or human behavior that you feel works every time with this, or is it
Hmm.
like again you just try certain approaches and it seems to work? Yeah,
Yeah, I think I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily say something that works every time, but again, playing on at least what worked for me uh, consistently, not all the time, but consistently was trying to appeal to the kindness of people, and like I mentioned before, and that more often than not would work, but not always. You definitely had some rule followers, and that was harder to navigate, despite how we approached and kind of playing off those emotions and trying to get people to be kind and it definitely didn't work all the time, but I think that was probably the most, at least for me, was the most used way to most effective way to get into locations.
nice. And
Yeah.
then kind of talk me through some of the challenges that you'd faced then within the industry. Again, these can be professional, personal. Yeah,
So I had an interesting path to the seat I'm in today. And like I mentioned, I did a lot of professional services. So I was in that space for a long time, consulting, um, other projects, advisory work, managed services on the technology side as well as the security side. And that eventually led to what we now all affectionately call a virtual CISO role. But I was doing that kind of activity before we coined that term, virtual CISO. And a couple interesting things that have come about as I've seen others um, opine on that whole world is one, you shouldn't be a virtual CISO if you haven't been a CISO before,
yeah,
right? And I'm not here to necessarily debate that, but that has been an interesting challenge that I've come across. I don't agree with that wholeheartedly, obviously, because I was one of those individuals that was not quote unquote a CISO before virtual CISO. I think being effective in that world of virtual CISO consulting or fractional CISO, whatever you want to call it, requires the right individual to be able to execute on something like that and actually have uh, produce a work product that is strategic for a business versus somebody that's just more tactical and kind of taking care of day-to-day security issues versus having somebody with a strategy around security. And so I think that's where a lot of the argument comes in, but I did feel somewhat like an imposter in well, could I really add value to somebody as a virtual CISO if I wasn't a CISO? I think I was able to navigate that, but it always something that kind of stuck in the back of my mind. So I'd say that's one aspect of it. And then it's interesting because as I was thinking about these questions this morning, I'm thinking about some of the challenges that I've had. This role, again, because I was working for two other companies as a CISO, but they were professional service companies, and even one, this last one was serving an internal constituency. So it was all internal companies, not external facing. We weren't going to get business externally. This was kind of a shared service internally. And even in that role as a CISO and a previous role in a consulting organization as the internal CISO, I was treated differently by people externally, by other CISOs. And it's been eye-opening in the last few months, literally, how behavior has changed toward me now that I'm an internal CISO completely. I'm not part of a professional services group or anything like that. So I don't know what that means exactly. It's just some uniqueness to how I've come to the position I'm in now, my journey here, and I would imagine there's other people that have had similar journeys that may have experienced similar things. And I think it's unfortunate like, again, I was able to weather it, no issues. I'm here, it's fine. But those two things kind of did nag at me for some time.
And do you think that's like maybe misconceptions about like the kind of difference? So like if you're working internally with a portfolio of companies, or working with you said a professional services company, like do you think that's just like ignorance, snobbery? Like what do you think kind of creates that? Because the way I see it is like we're all the same community,
Right.
regardless of which flavor we represent at the time. But we share the same common problems as cyber leaders. We go through the ringer. We have amazing achievements and success. I kind of, for me, it's like I wouldn't treat anyone different. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on that, Don.
And I agree with you, Leo, on all of what you just said. I do believe that there is potentially a level of arrogance in that, and ignorance. It could be a combination of both. For the most part, the CISO community is very welcoming, right? And you get into these circles with other security leaders, and everybody is very welcoming for the most part. So I would not say everybody. I wouldn't lump everybody into kind of that bucket of how I was treated or perceived. But there's a percentage of people that I do believe, one, certainly could be arrogant or ignorance. Sorry. And what I would say for that, for example, internal portfolio companies, it was if somebody has not been in that position before, it may be difficult for them to understand, right? So I think that leads to a bigger issue is judging if you haven't lived that experience or been in that position. It's easy for everybody to judge, including myself. Like, why is that person doing that? Or why is that outcome happening? But I've never actually myself been in that position. You're kind of talking out of ignorance, and so could be a judgment there without understanding what it's truly like. And obviously that's a bigger philosophical issue, bigger ethical issue potentially. But so I do think there's some ignorance there, and maybe a touch of arrogance, which I can understand, especially when some of my peers in the CISO community. I mean, you see some of the jobs that they have. They're massive global CISOs. I mean, the breadth of experience that they are able to take away from some of these larger Fortune 5, Fortune 100 roles. It's not something that I experience. It's not something that's in my background. It's not something I could bring to a client in that virtual CISO role because I just hadn't been in that position yet. So I think while there is potentially some arrogance, that there's also something to be said for that level of experience and being able to bring it down to smaller clients or clients in general in that virtual CISO capacity. All the combination of all of that, right? There's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, good question.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like is yeah, run me through your topic that you want to discuss. You feel needs relevance and clearing up within the industry. Yeah.
So yeah, you and I, when we talked about this a couple months ago, or maybe it hasn't been that long, maybe it was just a month ago, but I have a passion around company and team culture. And I do, especially when it comes to technology and security. I think it's hard for engineers, analysts, regardless of where you work in technology, it can be difficult to uh, be tied back or understand your impact on the mission of a larger team or the mission of the company. And so I have found companies that may not make team culture or company culture a priority. And the further down you go in that, from the top of the organization, further you're abstracted from that. And I'm going to put kind of the tech and security teams somewhere towards the bottom as far as being abstracted from that top layer of leadership. That happens at least more often than not. Team members can get disassociated from the work that they're doing and not feel like they're making an impact and not understanding the impact they're making. And even the leaders in the security team can feel the same way and not take it upon themselves to have a different culture within their team that maybe the company is not providing or not championing. So everywhere I go, I attempt to make some positive impact, even if it's so very small at the team level. But if I can find a way to make an impact at a larger team or at the company level, I want to be able to do so. And that's one of the reasons I find I enjoy working at smaller companies where I am able to make more of an impact specifically in that area. And I generally gravitate toward companies where I can see, even if culture is not perfect, and I don't think there ever is one, and that's all in the eye of the beholder anyway. But even if I think there's opportunity to improve culture, it's not quite where I would want it to be necessarily in all areas. I'm going to gravitate towards a company where I feel like I'm going to be able to make an impact for folks that report to me, as well as potentially my peers and others. And so it's an area that I'm passionate about, and not everybody shares my passion. So I will get in there and try to change things. And sometimes you hit brick walls. Sometimes you find sort of that ceiling of where you're going to be able to make an impact. And there's been multiple companies over the years that I've been a part at where eventually I just keep hitting it, right? And I'm like, I gotta push past this. We can do this. I know we can do it. Nope. Like keep hitting my head against a wall or a ceiling, and eventually, I'm going to get tired of it. I'm going to move on and find another place. I don't want to get to the point where I'm discouraged enough to not keep trying. So if I've run out of my runway there at a particular company and I've been doing it for a while and I just know I'm not going to make it any further, I'm going to try to, find another position where I can, again, make another impact and potentially go even higher as far as being able to do that for everybody in the organization.
Makes sense. And, I'm interested to get your opinion or any advice on, how you can help change a culture or impact it. Like many people we've had in the podcast like to gamify things.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, they kind of know within like a few weeks if the culture can change at all. I think that's quite interesting. They can have that foresight to see so far ahead. Do you have any advice on or things that have worked for you that might help other people?
Yes, I do. And it's something even in this moment, in talking about culture, this, what I'm going to talk about works, but it works everywhere in anything you're trying to do, regardless of where you happen to be, your role, company you're at, what you do for a living, all of that. It's about building authentic relationships, right? And so if that's a priority to you, then you're going to be able to impact culture or a lot of other things. And where I have found that most helpful to me and to others is, coming into an organization, let's say, and inheriting a team. I personally, I'm going to start with my team. I'm going to start the closest proximity. And start building relationships with those team members. One, because I want to know who I'm working with, who's working for me, and I want them to know who I am. So I'm not going to just come in one day and sort of, vomit all over them and be open and kind of super vulnerable. I'm going to authentically start to build one-on-one relationships. I'll share what I can, and I'll start to kind of open up the conversation. At the same time, or maybe version 1.1 here is I'm going to start building peer relationships and level up relationships. So who are my peers across the organization outside of security, right? Outside of IT, and what touch points do I have up a level from where I am, including who I'm reporting to, but their peers as well. Where can I start to make contact? And it varies in the company. I mean, there's not going to be one size fits all, but if you keep your eyes open and understand, okay, where is this peer engaging in the company? And is there an opportunity for me to get into some of those same conversations and just start to dialogue and understand what their priorities are and understand their background and get some common touch points? Do they have a family? Do they have kids? Do they have dogs? Like just start having conversations, but do it in a way that doesn't feel like it's self-serving or that you're trying to get something out of them. And so definitely focus on building relationships. I have found that to be not only helpful inside a company to create relationships, build culture, get things done, try to shift and move projects, move big rocks, get goals accomplished, but also in even just networking in general, for career opportunities, for advancement, for another opportunity at another company to work at. Build authentic relationships. In fact, I was having dinner last night with a group of security leaders and even some vendors, but this was wouldn't say it was completely uh, impromptu, but it was very quick to get the person that put this together pretty quickly. Within a few days, everybody got together and just had a great time. Some people I knew, some people I didn't, but the purpose of it was not to buy anything, not to sell anything. It was, and the note that he wrote, which I just read this morning, about why he put that group together, it was simply about valuing people and relationships, wanting to continue to build those relationships and build on the foundation that we had and kind of do life together. And so if you can take that mentality as you are building your relationships inside a company, outside a company, different circles you operate in, is very effective, not only in, like I said, career advancement, again, being able to get back, but also in building a team culture and a company culture. And just sometimes it takes longer to do that than you would want it to do. And you know what? That's okay. You've got to be patient, continue to build those relationships, and then you can start to get some things done, which is kind of fun. But it all starts with that foundation of authentic relationships for me.
I love that. To me, it's the human touch point that I think a lot of people in security, they're more concerned about implementing a technology or a process, forgetting to include people or just get to know them, have a transparency. You mentioned commonality, which is super important, a sense of realism of
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to do, but do it together. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
take people on that journey, you're more likely to get things moving in terms of the culture
Yeah.
and make it about them. How many times have we seen security leaders come into a position and it's like, I'm here to make a name for myself. You've
Yeah.
inherited a team and they're just like, who's this guy
Right.
or girl,
Yeah.
But I like
Yeah.
that. In your opinion then, Don, what does a good team culture look like? Do you have any expectations? Do you kind of set that out for your team or teams that report to you? What does a good culture look like? Yeah.
That's hard to define quickly, so I'll do my best. I've managed a lot of remote teams. So, in fact, the company I'm at, we're all remote on the cyber team. Um, so I'd say first and foremost, especially if you're in that position, get the team together, periodically, as often as you can, physically in the same location. So it's great that like we're doing this virtually, right? We've got Teams and Zoom and all the things that we can see each other's face. There's nothing like being in the same room and solving problems together in a conference room, and also going out for dinner, drinks, whatever you want to like socialize. So first and foremost, create opportunities to be together physically, that yes, maybe working on some work stuff, but also just having fun together, right? And having those shared experiences where you are, going into the escape rooms or like whatever it happens to be, make some fun of it so you can get people to relax, let their guard down. That's where I have found the strongest connections made, when you're outside of the office, but you're together and you're having fun and it's late having a drink and you're just really talking about things that you may not normally talk about in the day-to-day life at work. Even if you are in physical close proximity, getting outside of that workplace can definitely go a long way. And I would say the other thought I have is don't force it. So you cannot, I have not been, I would not recommend trying to force people into being vulnerable or having, sometimes it's not going to work, or sometimes it's not going to work right away. So that's what I talk about, being patient. Everybody's going to see you differently based on their past experience, especially if you're coming in new. So I've had multiple experiences where I've come in new, inherited a team, and you're right, Leo, they look at you like, who's this guy and why would I care and why do I want to talk to him? And he's asking me, like, you've got to be patient. So you can kind of hopefully get that understanding right away about your team members as you're talking to them. Some are going to be more open, some are going to be more reserved. And it may be that you've got to put more attention to those ones that are going to be more reserved. So do you find it opportunity to get them out one-on-one, or if they're remote, fly to wherever they are, for a conference and a get together with them, making it intentional, but don't try to treat everybody the same, because I do think, when you potentially put like a team exercise out and you're like, okay, everybody share all your personal stuff here, and then we're going to talk about it as a team, you're going to put people off and then you're going to see them exit out the door. So just be careful about how you're choosing to build those authentic relationships. Make sure it can be individualized and you take the time to do so.
I love it. It's excellent advice. And I think we've seen so many people like trying to shoehorn into certain situations or just go so crazy on it that even the people that are engaged are just like, this is too extreme. You're right.
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue, and
and it's not something I am not a patient person by nature. So I have to remind myself, okay, this person's not ready yet, or this requires a little more effort. But yeah, I'm not a patient person.
I think that's a good. Well, it's a good telltale sign that you have emotional intelligence. Where you're able to understand. That hey, you want things to go faster, but obviously
right.
you need to nurture that relationship with other people and that person management style. Like you imagine if we were a sports team, if you were a coach or a manager, that
Yep.
a lot of players need that nurturing. But anyway,
agreed.
we and on to the last portion of the episode. Don, is the one thing in cyber you think is BS and needs a focus on or needs to change?
So I just gave a talk last week in Jacksonville, and the premise of the talk, I'll gonna summarize it quickly in the last few minutes, is to stop chasing kind of the silver bullet, the shiny thing that's going to solve all of our problems. So I love the startups and the new solutions that are being brought to the market, and I love working with new startups. Israel's got them. Obviously, I've worked with some startups in Ireland and Spain and the US, and I love the energy around that. And at the same time, we can get very distracted on what are we actually doing in our security programs? Do I need this new thing that something's trying to, solve for? Is that is that one of the fundamental controls that I need to be paying attention to? So going back to that talk in Jacksonville, I presented kind of the 13 controls that I think are foundational to a security program. And I've used them over and over and over. And yes, you can use newer technology in some of those controls. At the same time, especially if you don't have budget for it, then focus on the foundational elements. So for example, patch management. We all love it. We all hate it. But if it's not done correctly, like forget about almost everything else. You're going to be compromised, right? And you got to have, let's talk about this. You got to have a good working relationship with your technology operations team, because the security team's not doing that work typically. You're monitoring it, but you have a team, typically a team elsewhere in the company that's actually doing the patching and the remediation work. So again, going back to relationships, but focusing on some of the basic fundamental control elements of a security program versus chasing the thing that's going to solve all of our problems. And trust me, get it. I love the vendors. I love the technology vendors that are out there doing new things. We need them as an industry, but I tend to see more leaders buying products to solve a problem versus making sure their foundational security controls in their program are solid. And you see these large breaches. Well, it's because they didn't have MFA turned on. Are you kidding me? Right. So managing those MFA excludes all of that, focus on the basics, make sure your program is foundationally sound before you're chasing after the next AI tool to solve all your problems.
I love that. There's such a thing at the moment, and it has been for the past couple of years. It's like people are chasing that gold at the end of the rainbow,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they become so dazed because there's a lot of really good companies. Their marketing is absolutely on point.
Mm-hmm.
I won't name any, but there's some up and comers, let's just say, that are challenging in the cloud space, and their marketing is probably some of the best I've ever seen. And you're absolutely right. Like the basics. You mentioned patching. I was once at an organization that hadn't patched anything in something like 3 decades.
Oh my gosh.
like the vulnerability count was like so extreme that it was like, we're going to need to build like at the time we had Excel, and we're like, I think we're going to actually need to build a database to track this. And it's like, where do we even begin? Because then you're realizing the team's responsible for those components. Like we had software engineers that had never been trained in software development.
That's
we get infrastructure people.
Some of the basics, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, again, like within your 30 controls, let's just say hypothetically, there would be things like education, training, various different awareness, like even roles and responsibilities, I think is a key thing that's always missed. Like defining a person's role so they know that they are on the hook for something. Again, if the organization doesn't know that, let's say software developers need to maintain code or update libraries or whatever it may be, repositories, if they're unaware and not being educated maybe from previous companies or institutions or wherever they've come from, you're kind of on it hiding, I guess. And key thing, relationships you've mentioned again, and that's like, people don't know what they don't know. So if you're having a conversation over a coffee, like, hey Bob, you guys should be looking at this. This is why. If they don't understand the why, then how can it be guided? But sorry, yes, Don, if you've got any thoughts on that,
I think you're 100% correct, especially when you look at the engineering teams, right? So we'll just take that as a microcosm. Why would they want to look at those vulnerabilities as they're producing the code? Well, because producing good secure code producing secure code means you're producing good code, right? You want to produce good code, correct? You want to produce quality, good code. Yes. Well, security is part of that. That's the why, right? So if you produce insecure code, then it's automatically, at least in my mind, and it should be in their mind, it's not as good. It's not as quality, right? So having that being able to talk with whatever outside team or tangent team that you're talking to and help them understand the why. Again, the same as, when you look at technology operations and the patch management. Well, your why, right, is part of your why is availability, right? You want to make sure systems are up and productive and people can use them. Well, if you don't patch, the likelihood of that system going down or not being available is much higher, right? That's their why. Talk to them in that kind of setting, and then they can understand, all right, maybe he's right, maybe she's right, maybe I should be paying attention to this, and actually make some change.
Absolutely. Like, I think something I've kind of always wondered, and I've spoke with multiple peer groups about this, and you know, the why component, it kind of breaks down to things like pride.
Mm-hmm.
Take some pride in your job.
Mm-hmm.
Tech debt, explain, you know, why doing things right correctly first time. That means there's less likely you're going to get your head kicked in at some point,
Right.
or if the infrastructure goes down, or you deploy something and it's absolutely shit, and it's like then
Yeah.
it comes back, and then hey, Janice, you need to work on the weekends. It's like this is terrible, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
a small config that could have just been done in the initial build,
Yeah.
or like they don't understand repetition. I worked for a large SaaS provider, and their customers were constantly hounding them. We spent more on customer support and support agents and overtime because we just couldn't fix the
Mm-hmm.
problems. Then once you actually break it down, like 90% of the people we hired just weren't good enough. They were great maybe 25 years ago, but they'd had no investment, so they
Yeah.
didn't understand what a modern day tech stack and deployment looks like.
Mm-hmm.
We had people that like their limit was Delphi, and I'm like, we're trying to migrate to the cloud, like
Right.
AWS, and
Right.
people are like,
Yeah.
what is that? What is an AWS? It's like,
Yeah.
people hadn't, like, there was no like investment in them. So you're kind of like, what do we do? Go to market and get modern day people, but then that
Right.
spends costs. But you kind of need to weigh off the chaos that comes in when customers are like, why is none of this stuff working? It's like, because it's not being built correctly, it's not being
Right.
maintained.
Right.
So
Yeah, it was funny. I
yeah.
was part of a healthcare organization that kind of had similar things to what you're talking about. It wasn't quite as dated, but one of the applications, one of the primary applications they had built was not built, and this was not an old organization. I mean, even now it's a younger organization, and like even they built this application that kind of ran their business. It was the core of what they did. How they operated the business was built into the processes in this application, and it was built for on-prem. Like, it was not micro segmented at all. Like, we couldn't, it was not even a way to lift and shift it. Like, it was terrible to try to get it outside of how they built it. But again, why? Because the people that built it, that's all that they knew, right? There wasn't any necessarily drive to figure out how can we improve this and how can we make sure this can scale. That's just kind of the box that they stayed in. That same organization, kind of to your point earlier about vulnerabilities, let this go on for so long. As I came in, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to do something. We ended up it wasn't quite a database. I mean, we had over like 1 million vulnerabilities. We brought in kind of a SWAT team externally, and that's all they focused on. The time and effort and cost to do that in a single project far outweighed what it would have been to just maintain it operationally moving forward. Somebody's paying attention to it. We're actually locking hands and saying, yes, this is a priority, and we're going to do that. The disruption it caused, thankfully, there were no outages, no breaches, et cetera, but it could have been a lot worse. I've just seen it where it's neglected. One of those core principles is neglected, and it's such a huge effort to try to fix it after the fact versus just, having good practices all along.
Absolutely. The people that then are parachuted in or they need to pick it up, they're so disengaged because they've
Mm-hmm.
probably been telling the organization for years to fix these things. But
Right. Yeah.
welcome to the wonderful world of
That's
cyber, I
it.
guess. But
That's why.
yeah,
That's why we work in
any
this space. So,
absolutely, Don, absolutely. And any final thoughts before we wrap up?
make some change. So, if anything in this was helpful, and I hope it was, take something out of it, do something, hold yourself accountable, build relationships, and if I can be of any assistance, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn, or that's kind of where I'm most active. But happy to engage and meet new people as well. But take something out of this and do something positive.
Love it. And again, everyone, please show Don some love online. Everyone, please like, share, subscribe, and all the other guff that comes with YouTube. Guff is a UK word, by the way, Don. So it just
I don't
means
even
like,
know what that means, but I like it.
yeah. Why don't you research it? And anyone,
Okay.
leave some comments in the chat if you know what guff means. Actually, might be Scottish, but there you go. But
Okay.
anyway, Don,
I'll look.
thank you so much for your time. Thanks for reaching out on our groups, and again, everyone, please again show some love to Don. And yeah, thanks again for your time, Don. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks, Leo.